So hi everyone, welcome to Equal Experts Online. I'm Vishwas Bhagat. I'm the business unit lead for Equal Experts at Bangalore. Uh, so today we are very excited to welcome Sreekandh Balakrishnan, who will talk through his exciting journey of bringing agility into his organization as a CTO and a technology function at at Enchanting Travels. A brief about the talk. Agile development is touted as a solution for uh, challenging all challenges technology teams face today in rapidly evolving business circumstances. The interpretation of what is agile is, often varied and confusing. So Shrikant will be here to talk about a bit of his journey of, agile transformation at his organization in Enchanting Travels. Before we start, I would like to congratulate him on his new role as the Technology Director for Product and Innovation at Travelopia Group. Congratulations, Shri, for
Thank
that.
you.
Before I just pass it over to Shri, just a couple of points. A bit about the meeting protocols. So if you have any questions, please use the Zoom Q&A function. You can start posting your questions there, and if people feel it's relevant, please upvote those questions, and we'll start answering those questions by the order of their votes. So if you like anything covered, please feel free to upvote. I'll hand over to you now, Shri. Thanks
Yeah.
again.
Thank you, Vishwas. Welcome all. I guess it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have an audience from pretty much across the world. And quite excited to be here. And when Rajesh and Vishwas reached out to me to give this talk, I was I was not really fully sure what I'm going to share. And then I kind of stepped back and said, okay, let's look at what we have done together or what we have done at Enchanting. And then I said, it makes a lot of sense to share my journey/story rather than one more pointed checklist of, oh, here is what an agile checklist looks like, right? That actually defeats the purpose of being agile, right? I mean, being agile is about figuring out what works well for you and your project and your customer and your product rather than following a standard checklist. Yeah. It's a bit odd to me. I am used to online meetings, but I'm used to on very interactive online meeting, and this is a webinar, so it's a very monologue feeling. So once in a while, Rajesh and Vishwas, you can probably give it a shout and say, yeah, you guys exist here, and ask me questions in between too. Or if you want to kind of break the monotony every 5-10 minutes, if there is an interesting question, please do ask. Uh, just a bit background. I mean, I don't have any fancy slides. It's a very simple set of bullet points just for me to recollect how I've gone through my journey. I do have some speaker notes. I'm going to read some of those points from here, not as a bullet point in the slides though, but just an introduction to who am I and why am I talking here and what made Equal Experts select. Hopefully this is the reason why Equal Experts said you should talk about agility. And I was just telling this to my colleague when I was preparing for the slide. I mean, when I look back, do I know any other way of doing what I'm doing? I mean, what I'm doing is the only way how I know to do things, right? So I have seen waterfall and other kind of project models, but I mean, this way of doing agile is the only way my brain resonates well. What's the history? I kind of course, started as a computer science engineer, started as a developer, dabbled around open source in my early days. Uh, kind of spent a couple of years on that, but then I reached kind of I think I reached my midlife crisis much earlier, and I kind of realized that I'm probably not doing what I'm really enjoying doing, right? I mean, solving problem, yeah, great. I know how to work with computers. I know how to commit code. I know how to do good software development, but it was not sufficient for me as an internal craving, right? That's when I kind of pivoted my career to a little bit of a consulting role. And again, the consulting role was purely to kind of explore, can I do something beyond just software code development, right? And I started getting a flavor of consulting myself in early days, like 2009, 10. And what that taught me was when I'm closer to a business problem, I think the joy of writing the code to solve that problem was much more higher than just writing code for the sake of writing code. Yeah. And I kind of picked up with a variety of companies because consulting, of course, give you the freedom of doing whatever you want. So it was kind of in I would say a solo journey that I choose in 2009, 10 to kind of figure out, okay, can I work with this company? Can I work with that company? Of course, survival was the initial thing that I kind of figured out. So what I did was I did half survival projects, which is like boring, just get money. half was like, let me experiment and see, can I really add value? And what I kind of, during that phase, what I realized is if I'm able to find businesses which has good business model but need a smart technology roadmap for scaling, I think that's something that I was enjoying, right? So I did not define it as enterprise or startups or XYZ. I kind of said which business owner who has good business problem to solve, and he is doing currently a fairly good business out of that, but also needs support in scaling that, right? And so to me, technology should bring in scale and help you grow the business, right? So I kind of discovered that, and I kind of figured out that I enjoy this kind of $1 to $100 million kind of a company in terms of revenue, and kind of help them think about the technology roadmap and help them scale, right? Started working with a bunch of them. Enchanting Travels, which I'm currently the CTO, was one of the companies that I started consulting to. And of course, my first project was not anything fancy about Agile or anything, but the project was about migrating from Outlook to G Suite, right? And I'll talk about why that was interesting in the Enchanting journey about selecting certain tools also. Uh, Again, early days, I got exposed to the standard stuff all of us go through. Lean Canvas, quite excited about that. Lean Startup. I think Lean Canvas from Ash Maurya, right? And Lean Startup, the standard book, the blue color book that all of us have, probably the Bible of the Lean movement, right? And of course, Agile philosophy. Of course, the reason didn't call out Agile philosophy was Agile philosophy was one pager, and it was like the 10 points. It didn't excite me. I want to read something, and that's when I kind of started reading this Lean Startups and all the other books, right? And and what I vaguely remember is the moment I read about Agile, Lean, and a lot of these concepts. Of course, I was quite excited about it, and I mean, I tease my little one who's 5-year old. He tends to learn something, and he kind of starts preaching to other. Oh, this is how you do things, right? And I also did the same. I kind of learned about Agile. I started telling my customers and partners, saying, "Oh, you should do Agile like this," right? And then I kind of stepped back and said, it doesn't make any sense to kind of tell others how to do Agile. Let's just step back and say, can we deliver value? Forget how we do it, right? So I kind of stopped preaching about Agile, and I said, let's start doing things and start showing things, right? And the slides is about that journey of how I transformed, I helped the company transform. Yeah. And what about Enchanting? So Enchanting, of course, is a luxury travel company. Again, the mission was to create custom tailor-made travel experiences for the travelers across the world. Been in existence from 2004, started by two INSEAD colleagues in 2004, literally out of the dorm. Kind of had a pretty good starting point in 2004 with a successful launch of German market, customers from German traveling to India. So the first brand Enchanting Travels launched was enchantingindia.de, which is about taking customers from Germany to traveling to India, right? Um, we are quite a global company as of today. We are present in Munich, Denver, Africa, Buenos Aires, pretty much in India, both in Bangalore, Delhi. We have a small presence in Australia. We are pretty much global, 19 nationalities across pretty much 12 countries. And interestingly, I do have calls at morning 2 a.m. sometimes, because there is no other time that I could find to speak across time zones, sometimes insane. Most recently, of course, we got acquired by Travelopia. Travelopia is one of the largest travel collections of special travel brands. I'll talk about that journey also as we speak through the slides. Yeah. Um, just a sound and audio check. Am I audible? Am I visible? All good, Rajesh? Okay, great. Great. Thanks, Vishwas. Thanks, Rajesh. Um, Again, just a little bit of history of Enchanting Travels. Of course, the one of the founder of Enchanting Travels is a German, and you know how Germans are, right? I mean, they're quite keen on automations from the get-go, right? I mean, they're efficiency masters. So even when the company got started, the founder of Enchanting Travels, Parik, used to always say, "Oh, we leveraged maximum tech at that point of time, which was Excel macros and scripts and whatnot." And we were able to create a itinerary using the Excel macros, right? And remember, this was the first brand, Enchanting German, enchantingindia.de, which is German travelers coming to India. This worked quite well, uh, but the company started rapidly growing, and the number of destinations and number of source market increased, right? And pretty much Excel macros, like you all know, it can work for small startups, but the moment the data volume increases, even today it fails, right? So of course Excel failed. Around about 2008, I mean, there was a small effort by Enchanting Travels to kind of put some technology investments because, of course, uh, uh, I mean, they said, okay, let's try giving it to a local vendor who has done software development. And interestingly, it was creatively named as IT tools for the lack of any other better creative word. But it did, of course, did not yield the desired results. And the reason being, I think it was not about bad software. It was about which problem to solve, right? I mean, what to attack first. Like the software was working, but did it solve the right problem, right? So it looks like the problem identification was largely wrong. And I think that project did not take off. And when that did not take off, I think the Enchanting kind of stepped back, and the board kind of stepped back and said, I mean, why are we building software? I mean, there is dime a dozen travel company in the world. Travel industry is mature. Why are we building a software? Let's just buy a software off the shelf, right? Uh, and I was jokingly telling this to Rajesh earlier that personally, I also like companies buying software rather than building, because building is I mean, people are used to just go to a showroom and buy a car and just drive it tomorrow morning. But building a software is an art. It takes patience. It takes, I mean, perseverance. It takes budget. It takes a lot of late nights and mornings and whatnot, right? So I always kind of sometimes discourage some of my, I mean, when I give advice to companies saying, please don't build your own software. It's much more tougher than what you think. Just buy and just solve your problem. Um, of course, in 2010, I was not part of Enchanting Travels, but I do remember Parik, who was the founder of Enchanting Travels, reached out to me through a friend and asked me if can I give you some money and build the product for us, right? And there is a mention here of 120 features, and how that 120 features came out was one of the project managers in Enchanting kind of started listing down all the features that needed for the company for it to function. And it was roughly about 120 features that they had to build, right? So, it's, so to speak, think of it as a wish list. Of course, it's not a product wish list or anything. It was like, okay, this is my problem. I need this to be solved, right? And my response to this was, I mean, we could build, but we cannot manage, right? I mean, because it was small budget, so the wish list was quite high. And I also kind of, I was maybe a bit evil at that time. And I said, maybe companies will have to learn or burn their hands before building the software. So I kind of said, yeah, just go buy it. I think that's better for you, right? Because first of all, they were quite, uh, I mean, of course, less money because the company was small. Not that they didn't want to invest. Of course, there was not enough money. And second is sometimes you appreciate goodness when you go through a little bit of a bad phase, right? I wish this is not recorded and Parik is not listening to this. He'll kill me if he hears me this saying this. Uh, but again, I was a bit evil and said, yeah, just go buy it. I think that's better for Enchanting at that point in time. Um, and of course, the expectation when we bought this was productivity increase for the sales team. And definition of productivity, it's I mean, there are many definition of productivity, but one thing that is relevant for Enchanting was how much time it takes to generate the proposal and how many people were involved. And if I remember the data at that point in time, I remember, I think it was roughly 24 to 48 hours based on, like if you send a request for a proposal on a Friday, you will get it on Monday. So that's technically 48 hours. Within the weekday, it was like 24 hours turnaround time. And the number of people involved in the process was like 4 to 5, right? I mean, to generate a proposal, right? So that was the lever I remember at that point also we were using to measure productivity, right? Of course, I mean, as expected, the outcome definitely was not positive. It didn't eat much result. Uh, in fact, the productivity started going down and the number of processes became more and more complex, right? And that's where I came in like a Superman, saying, okay, now that this project has failed 2 times, we have failed. Now what can we do, right? Um, And of course, at that time, I mean, I told you earlier, right? I mean, I was a big lover of lean, agile, and I think lean was at that time my buzzword in my brain, right? I mean, how do we do less, but really focused on the real problem? Uh, but the challenge thrown to me was, here is the 120 feature checklist you got to build. Can you build this for us? Company was going through a very challenging business environment, which was about scaling the headcount. I mean, that's only, I mean, we cannot scale uh, uh, just by increasing the headcount. We have to scale by smartly by investing in technology, right? I mean, that was very clear for the survival of the company. And like I said, I mean, tech was just not an option. It was the only way out, right? So it kind of was positive. So though I was evil in 2010, maybe in 2014, it kind of came in my favor in terms of asking for the right investments. And then what I pretty much did during that time was I was pretty much the solo developer. I think I had one more junior developer who was with me. And in 2013-14 is when I realized that, I mean, that's when I started actively working with Enchanting Travels. And I realized that even as simple as a CRM system to kind of collect leads and distribute leads was non-existent, and the lead volumes were increasing, they said, why don't we just invest a proper CRM so that marketing can do a good job of nurturing the leads, and sales can nurture the leads well too. Uh, and while I was working in the CRM, I remember I think we built like 30 small automations or something like that. And what was these automations? These automations were all, for example, I mean, nothing rocket science. You get an IP along with the lead. You look at the IP lookup, which country it belongs to, right? And for me, it was like a half an hour task or something like that. But it actually saved tons of amount of marketing and sales people in updating the the country of the salespeople or the telephone extension of the salespeople, right? And I was just sharing this with Rajesh earlier that there was, I mean, I remember seeing a crazy aha moment in the leadership team that, oh, we needed so many manual people to keep the CRM up to date, but we invest in one technology person. I think it can really simplify how we can automate, right? And I kind of saw that aha moment, right? I mean, I can't explain that moment very clearly, but I think it's almost like a non-tech business leader kind of suddenly stepping back and saying, wait a second, if this small thing can be such a productive thing, what about automating this? What about automating that, right? And the table kind of turned around. So instead of me going and shouting for, oh, we should build this feature, we should build that feature, suddenly the leadership turned around and said, okay, what about this? I think this is giving huge productivity gain. Maybe we should do more automations. And the learning for me, and maybe learning for you all, is I think sometimes it's not about doing a lot of things and volumes of things, right? It's about doing one or two things that can really move the needle and that can really turn the brains on, right? In terms of believing in the tech capability and how we do things. And and I, I think end of this aha moment, almost 12 months later, we had like 30 small automations on top of CRM. Like I said, nothing rocket science, very simple automations, but really saved a lot of people productivity and time, right? uh, I remember the offshoot of this also was a thinking that started emerging in the company, which is, for example, we had senior travel consultants, right, which are the senior sales agents. And one of their job was every day morning, look at the lead, assign it to someone, and kind of ensuring that the lead is served, right? But they're actually senior salespeople who are good in selling, not doing admin jobs, right? So we said, what if we automate the sales, the lead allocation, which will make their life easier. So again, the reason why I'm highlighting this was my learning has been, you can get excited about technology and say, oh, let's do everything tech, or you could step back and observe the processes, which is what I ended up doing, kind of looking at which are the key processes that companies doing, and which is where the senior most resources and the high professional, high paid resources are wasting their time, right? And is there a way to kind of do some automation? Um, and again, I mean, and again, the series of these small activity in my mind created the agile pivot within the company. And that and it was very interesting for me, right? I mean, again, I told you that I got this 120 feature checklist that I was supposed to build. And I clearly remember this day. I walked into the CEO's room and we kind of was brainstorming, how do we handle this? And my inner sense was saying, I mean, we should just chuck this 120 feature. We should just look at one thing that I can do, which I can prove the value first before we start looking at the list at all, right? Um, of course, we kind of looked at the most valuable thing that we could do. And I think the search was the most valuable that came out of that conversation. And to me, that's about a ruthless prioritization, right? I mean, think of 1 against 120, right? I mean, it's a tough negotiation. But what it does is it makes the business think, what is that I really want from technology? What is that as a proof that I can demonstrate, right? And for me, it was also about a proof of iterative development, right? Instead of spending too much time thinking about, is this feature right? Is that feature right? How can I demonstrate capability in a short amount of time, iteratively, right? So there are foundational principles that I was quite clear in my brain. I want to do anything, uh, uh, everything that I do has to go to production. And anything that I do, it needs to have an end in 2 weeks. And I need to showcase this regularly and get feedback from the end users, right? Of course, again, if you go back to the Agile philosophy, these are basic foundational philosophies of Agile, but I kind of internalized into what that means to my way of doing it, right? And to me, that I converted that to go to prod, define your sprint every religiously 2 weeks, prioritize it ruthlessly, in spite of having business pressure, showcase regularly to the end user, not to the business stakeholders, right? Who's going to use the product, showcase it to them, get real feedback to them, and continue this process for a while, right? And what happened during this pivot time was, so remember the 2010 where we had invested the off-the-shelf software which got implemented. By 2000, I mean, during this time frame, we pretty much made the off-the-shelf software a backend software, and we kind of replaced that with custom software on the top, right? And again, one thing that we measured is also was time to first proposal. By 2015 end or something like that, we were able to create a proposal in like 20 minutes or so rather than the previous 24 hours. And that, I mean, look at the business impact something like this can create, right? At 24 hours became like 20 minutes, right? um, I would also say the pivot also was not just technology. I kind of look at it as three P's, right? It's the process behind the teams that it follows, it's the people, and it's the product that we are building. I generally call it a 3P. So I knew that we are building the right product, and even if you are not building the right product, I knew that in 2 weeks I can correct it. So it's almost like a fail fast that helped us ensure that even if something is wrong, I am confident the wasted effort will be just for 2 weeks and I can course correct it in 2 weeks. The process is something I kind of went back to the business and said, okay, here is the requirement that I've got, but you got to make this process efficient because the process sounds too complicated. And the lastly, people, I think it's the Newton's theory, right? I mean, is it the third law, the inertia? I mean, all of us have, like, I mean, in the start of the call, Rajesh, who's one of the most respected project manager I have in life, he mentioned to me Zoom has changed something and he hates it. And if you analyze that, that's nothing but the inertia of the mind to change, right? I mean, all of us are agile practitioners. I'm sure there are developers in this call, product managers in this call. If one of your editors, Sublime 2 becomes Sublime 3, I'm fairly sure the developer will call out and say, Sublime 3 sucks, man. Sublime 2 was so light, so good. And I've heard this constant comment from people, right? So I think we all have this inertia to change, me included. Uh, and I think that, to me, that was the toughest thing to kind of get a buy-in in the whole process of development, right? So the pivot literally became not just the tech, but it was, like I said, all the three, right? I mean, review the processes, review how we build software development, review how we do change management or people management, right? um, again, it's not all rosy. I have had my shares of failures and learnings. So in 2015, this got kind of a good, excited journey, right? I mean, I proved the point that 24 hours became 20. So I was almost, I think maybe I was close to Neil Armstrong, almost in the moon, all done, great success, blah, blah, blah. But then we made some mistake, or I made some mistake. What we ended up doing was, okay, we said, okay, we solved sales problem. Now let's go solve other team members' problem, right? And just to give you a little bit of a context, I mean, again, you have to adopt this to your company, your project. Uh, so the setup that we have done is in our company, the sales is the highest thing, because of course in travels you need to have the high qualified salespeople, which means even from a salary table, they'll be in the top of the line. We also had a bunch of other team members where, of course, they are not that high paid or any of those. I mean, so if you solve some of the problems for a lot of other teams, it may not be paying off immediately, right? So what we ended up doing was we kind of put this hat and saying, let's solve every team's problem in the company, right? And it kind of backfired a little bit, right? And then kind of we realized for enchanting, it makes a lot of sense to kind of solve sales team problem and associated problem that connected with sales team, right? Not necessarily solve a back office problem, right? So we kind of stepped back and kind of started focusing on which can give the highest impact. Of course, you can't do this alone. You definitely need a strong ROI thinker, or you need a good business thinker to help you say, uh, is this the right problem to solve? Luckily, I had a bunch of them I could lean on. They were good business problem solvers. I went to them and said, okay, if I solve this problem, make this team efficient, do you think it's valuable, right? So that's pretty much the learning that we had during that time. Like I said, not everything was rosy. In 2 dot, so the version that I used to build, I mean, I used to call it a point 0.5 version for whatever historical reason. But it was very patchy, right? Because, like I said, because it was very iterative, incremental development. Of course, we didn't have a platform view or any of those, right? I mean, we were just building every 2 weeks. There were a bunch of 20 developers. They were building different modules, not necessarily well coordinated. Uh, and then we said, okay, let's step back and let's kind of, before we add more things, let's kind of uh, do a 2.0 version, because I wanted to skip the 1.0 because I felt, oh, it's a massive jump. So let's jump from 0.5 to 2.0. And then what happened was we kind of built that. We achieved some of the goals of at least getting a unified database view, at least a unified code base view, some best practices and things like that. Um, but something else also happened during at the same time, right? What we are realizing was the business was constantly changing, and this was not able to cope up, right? And my head of engineering also is in this call, and we were kind of brainstorming at that time. We created a new platform, but why is this not really scaling, right? So I'll talk about that in a second. Um, but I want to kind of walk you through a little bit of what happened until then, right? And how I was able to get more budgets and investments. So in 2014, like I said, you would see a flat curve here, right? I mean, nothing much moved. But 2015 is when we kind of pretty much released the first version. But then we kind of saw quite a nice incremental up to the overall sales per travel consultant, right? Of course, it's not just tech alone. There are multiple other contributing factors, but tech was definitely one of them, which enabled this journey, right? Uh, so this kind of helped us continue the tech journey. And if this would not have been there, I don't think the next slide is even relevant. I don't think we would have even started the next slide. Yeah. And interestingly, towards 2017-18 is when we also kind of were quite active in the market, because a lot of interest were coming for acquisitions and things like that. And we had a fairly good idea that tech is definitely one of the key levers for the company, right? Other than the business models and the key team members that we had. So tech started, I mean, remember the journey, right? I mean, we were uh, an Excel macro to a failed IT tool implementation to a custom software, sorry, off-the-shelf software, which did not really go well, to started building patchy softwares through my incremental approaches, to a 2.0 version, which is okay version, not a great version. It kind of solved a lot of technical debts that we had in 0.5. to a point where we said, okay, technology is the focus for the company to continue to invest, and it's a significant portion of our strategy in terms of company's overall growth path. Yeah. Um, Again, I'll talk about this in the last. I mean, this was more the milestone that we achieved, but I think in this context of conversation, acquisition is less relevant, but I'll talk about it towards the last. I'll come back to this. Um, so in 2019, I mean, this is probably one, I mean, I won't say marketing slide, but of course, Equal Experts name is here. But again, the intention was not to market Equal Experts. The intention was to share what I went through in my thoughts, right? Um, so like I said, remember in 2017, 18, when we built the 2.0, so from 0.5 to 2.0, it was a less patchy, unified database. We were able to use like a framework like Laravel, quite a mature framework. It solved most of the problem that we wanted from a code management perspective, just regular CI/CD stuff and stuff like that. But something interesting happened during 2017, 18, 19 for the business, right? So when I initially built any of the products that we are talking about, there was a foundational assumption that it's two people traveling. That's the 80% of the trip. Just solve their problem. And I think for majority of our enchanting trips, we should be more than sufficient, right? But interestingly, I mean, our market also expanded to other geographies, and many different types of travelers started coming in, right? And I'm sure a lot of you know who are in the travel industry. It's called a multi-generation trip, right? I mean, you have a grandfather, son, and a grandchild traveling together, each one of them having varied interest and varied variety of things to do. They might join later, they might leave earlier. So the trip became quite complex, so to speak, right? Um, and my first crack at implementing that pretty much failed. And the reason for failure was, though we were using Vue.js for front end, we were using Laravel, we were using MySQL hosted on cloud, a lot of good best practices compared to a legacy software, but we were nowhere close to uh, developing high quality software and constantly iterate and constantly improve, right? So I kind of broke that down into two, three buckets. Uh, for sure, I think we were very people dependent, which means though we did 2.0, there are certain people who would say, I will only do front end, I will only do back end, I can only do this, I can only do that, right? So that was one of the problem that me and my head of engineering kind of listed that as one of the key things. The second was like I said, the business constantly is evolving, right? And we had pretty much, I think, almost zero test coverage because, of course, we said test-driven development is a high cost investment. We should not be doing it because ours is not that complex. But what we realized is without a good test coverage, we were literally struggling to kind of add features and code. Uh, we had some sort of a CI/CD for the namesake, but not necessarily a mature CI/CD. What that means is, I always, like I said, my belief today is to go live every 2 weeks, right? I don't like stale branches, stale code. I want it to be production as soon as possible, right? And to me, that's what is all about in terms of continuous deployment, right? Uh, the other bucket was, of course, we were doing a lot of releases, but interestingly, the business processes was broken, right? So it was very interesting that on one side, we were able to release something and users were able to use it. But the moment when we release something where two people touches, who owns the business process transformation, right? Technology was not owning it. So we said, okay, this time when we do this, we need a very clear business owner who can think about business processes. And lastly, again, we also wanted people to give insights early on. So we used to do pilots. If you remember my previous slides, I used to give showcase to the user, but we never included them while defining the product itself, right? I mean, so we said, okay, can we switch the gear and flip the table? Instead of people coming in the last, can we come in the first to give us insights, right? Which is what is the participatory product building. Uh, and then again, the last one is more kind of ensuring that, I mean, people all knew that technology function exists at the leadership level, but they never knew what that means to that pillar, right? Can I access technology? Can I evolve technology? Can I dream big? How do I ensure we have a unified vision and whatnot, right? So we kind of pretty much had a so to speak, the product roadmap, so to speak, as of today, in terms of what are we going to build, how are we going to work with stakeholders, how will we prioritize, because we have limited budget, limited money, time, and people. How do we really reprioritize things? And something that we constantly in the newer version of 3.0, we also said, I mean, it has to be something like a WYSIWYG, right? What you see is what you get, not surprising behaviors of the software. So that pretty much is where we had some of the challenges where we kind of said, okay, we wanted someone who's mature to help us think through it, and that's where Equal Experts stepped in. Yeah. Uh, yeah, this is standard. I mean, in my mind, what are the key enablers? I mean, of course, these are, I mean, in my mind, standard hygiene things, basic source control, automatic deployments, good coverages. I'm a big believer of cloud and Chrome. And the whole of Enchanting we have built is they can just, I mean, even if they don't have a laptop crashes, they can just log into Chrome and they're all sorted. Now that we are part of the larger Travelopia portfolio, InfoSec for sure is one of the key thinkers that we always keep in mind. And again, we take a very iterative approach to InfoSec too, right? I mean, every 2-3 weeks, change something, not a big bang InfoSec change at all. Yeah, and wherever possible, do automation, right? So those are the standard agility enablers that I've kind of identified in the journey. Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, so what's up for me and what's up for Enchanting Travels? Like I said, we got acquired last year, got acquired by Travelopia, largest collection of the specialist travel brands. And they kind of really valued the technology platform that was built, right? I mean, this was kind of I mean, at least to me, was a very aha moment and a very satisfying moment in terms of, I mean, I'm sure for all my team members too, not just me, because I mean, first of all, you don't want to be writing code which nobody uses and nobody values it. And when you know that it's get even more high valuation, and we are able to create more value potential for the larger company and for the shareholders, I think that's even more exciting, right? So that happened in 2019. And thanks to this journey, like Vishwa said in the starting, I have a new role starting October 1st, which is I've taken over the innovation and product development for Travelopia. I mean, big titles, but I mean, end of the day, I'm doing the same thing what I used to do in Enchanting, but doing for more brands across the organization, right? But deep down, I mean, wherever I go, my foundational values are still the same, right? I mean, how can we add value, the short amount of time, frugal prioritization, get business to align to kind of drive the innovations forward? Yeah, I know I covered quite a bit. It's a bit of a monologue. How are we
We
on
do have
time, Rajesh? Yeah.
we do
Okay.
have a few Q&As here, if you
Yeah.
would like to take
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So I think the first question is, what are your views on agile rituals? So would you like to take that?
I mean, it's a good question. In fact, I'm going through that in my mind with another project. I mean, how important is ritual? I personally think. I think it's just a standard hygiene things, right? Which is your daily stand-ups, which is showcase. So, is it important to me? I think I cannot think of not having the rituals, right? But is that the only thing that I really care about? No, I really care about is did we achieve our outcome or not? And did it add the value? Did it move the needle, right? Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, it's again following a checklist of things, right? I mean, I think I'm completely anti following a checklist of things. You need to adapt to it, right? Uh, what I also believe is it also gives quite a bit of confidence to the team when you have a certain rituals, because they feel confident to have, like, I personally love retrospects. I think retrospect is one of the beautiful innovations of the world for team members to share their opinions and thoughts, right? Of course, if you don't do retrospect well, people are not going to open up their minds and share their real problems, right? So I personally believe, of course, there are basic things like a showcase, like a spike to plan the stories before, or a retrospect. I think standards should be followed, but I think that should not be the only focus in my mind, right? And that's the standard hygiene that we would need. Again, I think agility in my mind equal to you have to adopt to your business, right? Not just follow. Uh, standard checklist. So I don't know if I have answered it well, but in my mind, yeah, you need to use it smartly and don't get stuck to the rituals. Sometimes be bold and cancel the rituals too.
Yeah, I think that's thanks for that. I think that probably I can summarize it. You see it as more like a means to an end rather than,
Yeah,
the end of it, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
I think we have a couple more questions,
Yeah,
Shri. So I'll so
yeah, go ahead.
have you ever taken a feature out because the business goal was not met?
Uh,
So I think that's an interesting question.
it's a good question. So I told you about in Artemis 2.0 journey where we kind of overbuilt the feature capability, right? I mean, we built for sales team, we built for operations team, we built for finance team, and we pretty much kind of had to write off a lot of modules saying that that module is not the right focus and we need to kind of get it out, right? But there are complexities too, right? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of really go comment the code, because if the code is not well modularized, you cannot really take one feature out easily, right? But what I've done is taken a stance back and saying, okay, that module is not something we are not going to build further. I mean, leave it as is. There could be some manual processes around it. It might be inefficient for certain people. So we have taken some very, very bold calls of not further continuing development because we felt maybe a manual process is better for now, or an outside process is better. So again, links back to my first point. Remember I started with Outlook to G Suite migration. So lot of processes, if you think about it, Google Spreadsheet is a great place for collaboration, right? I mean, of course, if you're a very, very large company, Google Spreadsheet also fails. But for the size of ours, a lot of automation we did on top of Google Spreadsheets, right? So we use a lot of Google App Script, so to speak. So take data from the Artemis system that we have and put it in Google Spreadsheet and do a lot of automations on that. So I've not left the team hanging. I kind of supported it very differently, right? So yeah, yeah. So the short answer is yes, but I've given them solutions very differently.
Thanks, Shri. I think that's a good answer. Hopefully
Mhm.
it answers your query, Karthik. I think we have another question. What are some question in context of value creation that you still struggle with? Uh,
Uh, I mean, there are many puzzles that I go through pretty much every day, right? I mean, I think it's the list is endless. And even in fact, today, just before getting into this webinar, I think I've been. I mean, I'm not a great project manager, right? I mean, I believe I'm a good engineer. I can solve some business problems, and I believe the team that I put together, we have good product thinkers, we have good engineers, right? But if you think about business as such, they look at timelines as a way to measure is a project got done or not done, right? Something that I've constantly struggled in terms of uh, uh, should we achieve the right thing in the product or should we achieve the timeline, right? And that's a constant debate that I constantly uh, uh, go through. And there are a bunch of other puzzles also that I constantly go through, right? I mean, it's not one puzzle, right? I mean, for example, this is something that constantly keeps me awake in the night, right? I mean, should we really do a lot of documentation, or is the code the documentation, right? Again, the proof is you onboard a new developer and see how long he gets to onboard, right? So you have to do some small, smart experiments to kind of say, yeah, are you checking the box or not? But if you go back to a traditional company's board, they're used to seeing massive amount of documentation, right? In terms of this is how the feature has been built, this is how the thoughts have been gone in. So balancing that is always a little bit of a struggle. Um, the other challenges that I constantly struggle is also about the tech stack selection too, right? I mean, is it the right language, is it the right framework? And there is always a debate. I think me and my head of engineering had enough fights about which language to choose, what to choose, how to choose. And I mean, my head of engineering was a PHP guy by default, and I mean, we moved to the JVM world recently for good reasons, and it was a massive shift, right? um, but again, I mean, you can either choose to have a massive debate and kind of not do it, or we take an again an iterative approach, and that's what we did. We said let's work on it for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, see where we go. If we like it, continue. If we don't like it, kill it. So again, we applied some of the iterative approach there too, and kind of see what makes sense logically, right? So a little bit of a common sense need to be applied. And again, me and my architect have this constant fight about how much of smoke suit is needed, right? I mean, Should you do horizontally less suite of tests or more number of tests, right? I mean, there's always constant discussions and puzzles that keeps going on. The most recent puzzle that I've been struggling with, I feel like a little bit of an old timer. I grew up in the 2000 era, right? And to me, AI/ML is not my first nature of thinking, right? Um, and if you look at the new generation product thinking, AI/ML is kind of the first thinking, right? So how do we kind of uh, be data first, or like do machine learning first, is something that kind of puzzles me constantly. I mean, we have taken some small step towards it, but I mean, it's almost again goes back to the inertia thought, right? I mean, can't really, it's not your first nature. How do we get there, right? So yeah, I mean, these are some of the constant puzzles that keeps bothering. I don't know if that answers, but that's where my head is.
That's a
Yeah,
great. I think that's a great list. Probably a lot of us struggle with such questions, right? Especially
yeah,
tech stacks and which one is better. And there's always a heated debate on topics like
absolutely,
this.
absolutely.
There's one more question.
Yeah,
So I think this is about the slide you mentioned. You mentioned moving away from specialist in the team, right? Where you had, I will only work on front end or this
that's
module,
right.
or
That's
to
right.
having generalists. How did you guide the team through that transition?
So I think I mean, again, it's a very good question, right? Not an easy change. I mean, to be honest, we pretty much had to let go for one of the 2.0 team members, right? Because their mindset was not necessarily for multi-language, multi-framework, right? So some people sticked around, some people are able to adopt. You almost become like a polyglot, right? You become like an engineer. I mean, that's what I mean, me and head of engineering keeps talking about it. I mean, end of the day, you're an engineer first, not a front-end engineer or a back-end engineer first, right? Of course, you build expertise, right? Uh, but again, if you step back about it, again, it goes to the foundational basic principle. I mean, take 2 weeks at a time. Give them time to work on it, see if you're able to pick that up. We also selected some training modules and materials, right? I mean, there are some good online materials that helps people uh, learn. I think the what impacted the most in my mind was pair programming, right? I mean, I think out of all, I mean, you can talk about Coursera courses, YouTube courses, and whatnot, but I think there is something beautiful about test-driven development which gives confidence, and there is something beautiful about pair programming, right? I mean, of course, and remember where I came from. I came from a very traditional thinking of normal development teams and no pair programming and whatnot, to believing that test-driven development is the way to go and pair programming is the way to go, right? So I mean, my advice to that question would be two things. Number one, take it 2 weeks at a time. Don't overthink about it. uh, pair the right people so that they can kind of share the knowledge and kind of help each other grow, right? And I think if you know, I mean, we all as students in college, we have learned most from the peers, and suddenly when we come to the corporate world, we forget learning from the peers, right? And peers are very powerful. They can make or break a team. So have good peers who could train. um, and again, this doesn't go without saying you need to have a good competency framework to select the right people and constantly weed out someone who's not productive. So you need to have an honest retrospect. So to kind of call out, I mean, again, this is not a personal attack on someone not working well, right? I mean, look at the outcome, look at saying who's able to survive, not able to survive, and constantly adapt to people who can survive in that constantly evolving needs, right? So short summary, three things: take it 2 weeks at a time, trust in pair programming. I think if you have not started it, do try it. Even for one project, you will be pleasantly surprised how powerful it is. It breaks the knowledge silos. It breaks the need for specialists. That doesn't mean to say that someone will not be a specialist. Of course, in my team also there are experts in UI who could solve UI problem much better than the other. They become the subject matter expert, right? But in general, you build the overall collective consciousness of the team quite higher, right? Which makes them confident to do any part of the module, right? So it's not all rosy. You need to give team also some time. I think we took about 3 to 4 months to settle in with everyone moving to different roles. It's not so you got to be smart in committing your business deliverables during that time frame, right? Because that time it was the most stressful time for the team to kind of settle in, learn the new ways of working and whatnot, right? So Yeah, that's my tips on how to deal with that.
Thank you, Shri.
Yeah,
I guess we are almost at the end of the questions. Uh, so yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think hopefully everybody found this useful. And thanks Shri again for sharing your experience. I personally liked a lot of the tips you shared there. We'll definitely look to use some of it
awesome,
going ahead. Okay.
awesome. Yeah,
So and best of luck for your new role. I hope you continue to do good work over there as well.
yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. Up next in our client spotlight series is Rohan Berry. He's the head of digital IT for Big W. They're a large retail chain in Australia. He'll talk about migrating from monolith to microservices. His talk is going to focus on how what are we trying to focus in terms of delivery outcomes, how are the architectural changes done, and his experience. So it does sound interesting to me, and I hope to see some of you again next week. So please sign up. We'll share out the webinar link in our usual channels. And thanks everyone, and thanks again. Hopefully you have a good day, good evening, or good night wherever you are. Thanks a lot.